Hi, Highland Oaks family. This is Kevin for our daily devotional here on Friday. It was about this time, around 10 years ago. I was a sophomore in high school, and it was spring break. And our church that I grew up at, we had a sister church down in Brazil. And for that week, a little bit longer than a week, a family from our sister church in Brazil came up to visit us in Arlington, Texas. And part of that family was their two kids, Lucas and Lorena. Lorena was the younger one. She was a senior in high school, and Lucas was a freshman in college. And so both of them, by all accounts, were way too cool to be hanging out with me and my friends, but we were what they had for that week. And we had a great week together. Me and my friends from the youth group were off that whole week. We went to Six Flags and rode roller coasters and ate overpriced hot dogs that kind of blew Lucas's mind about how overpriced they were for how little toppings there were on them. We watched movies together. They had a guitar and they would sing songs, and we would just hang out and spend some really good quality time, and spent that week getting really closer than I really expected us to or anticipated that we would. And by the end of the week, we needed to kind of send them on to their next sponsor church, their next host home that they were going to do a few miles out from us. And so we went to this worship service at another church and said our goodbyes. And I got home to do the homework that I'd been procrastinating on all week, because that's kind of what you do during spring break when you're in high school. And I found myself, as I was trying to sit down and do this English assignment, that I couldn't bring myself to do it. And it wasn't just out of laziness or not wanting to do it, but it felt like there was just a pit in my stomach, like there was just like an empty feeling. And I quickly realized that I immediately just really missed Lucas and Lorena and this whole family that had been staying in our home. And so much so that the next morning I woke up and pretended to be sick, not just because I was a scoundrel, but because I really did not feel prepared or able to go back to school and kind of back to my new normal, because I was having trouble adjusting from this sudden shift that I'd seen coming all week. And so I think about that in the midst of the transitions and things that we're in the middle of together, right, as a church family and as a community and kind of as a world community, right? And I think about that in terms of grief and gratitude, because in that moment I felt really heartsick for these people, this kind of connection that we had made and that now was sort of phasing out and wasn't going to look the same that it had before. And as I was kind of grieving that and feeling poorly about that, I also came around to realize that the reason that I was feeling that in the first place was because I valued that connection and that relationship so much. I think it's funny that we don't tend to grieve the things that we're not also grateful for. And sometimes it takes that perspective in that moment to really realize, wow, I have some things I'm really grateful for. And it just is so strange that grief is the setting that happens in. You know, I think of Jesus meeting us in that place of grief, one of those moments that Jesus is most human that we point to is whenever he is grieving his friend Lazarus, right? In the world's easiest memory verse, Jesus wept. Not only is that this powerful moment that reveals this cosmic God who feels very human emotions, who meets us in really vulnerable, tender spots in our humanity, but also it makes me wonder just how much Jesus valued his friend Lazarus, how much he missed his friend Lazarus, and how grateful he was for that relationship. Before there's any miracle or resurrection, there's grief, and in the midst of that is also gratitude. And I think about that verse that has been turned into a very snappy and upbeat song, right, of we will enter his gates with thanksgiving in our hearts and his courts with praise. And sometimes the command, right, to be thankful or grateful can feel like a burden, like, oh, I better be grateful, I better be thankful, or else I'm doing something wrong. But whenever I think of that, I really just hear that where the presence of God is, gratitude is also. And when we are grateful, we are in the presence of God. And I think that just comes back full circle too, that whenever we are grieving, whenever we are disappointed and missing connections, missing being with our friends face to face, meeting with our family to worship together in the way that we're used to, anytime there's that kind of grief, there's also a gratitude that there is something holding us together, something that matters. That yes, I miss my friend, and that is not what I would prefer, right? I wish we were together, and yet that also draws my attention to how grateful I am for the relationships that I have. And so I don't want to send you with gratitude as a command of suck it up and be grateful, but rather as an assurance of, as you are grieving, may your attention also be brought to that which you are grateful for, and know that both of those are in the presence of God, that grief and gratitude hold hands, and God smiles on that and blesses that. And so I know that I am grateful very much for you, my church family, and continue living in grace and peace as we continue to find new ways to connect and express our gratitude for one another.